on 5 Live.
Round 10 of the Formula One World Championship sees us arrive in Spain at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya, for the beginning of an intense European triple header. And based on practice, it's tight at the top with potentially 4 teams all in the fight for pole position this afternoon. Welcome along to live coverage of qualifying ahead of the Spanish Grand Prix with myself, Harry Benjamin. Alongside me is former F1 mechanic Mark Priestley and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. Mark, it was Carlos Sainz on top at the end of FP3 I should say, but it was less than a tenth, about a tenth and a half, splitting the top 5 drivers. This could be anyone's game this afternoon.
Yeah, very, very exciting afternoon ahead. I think this is what we've all been waiting for, because it's not just a couple of drivers from the same team, it's not even just 1 or 2 drivers. This is 4 teams effectively in Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren and now Mercedes who've joined the party. This is 4 teams, at least 7 of the 8 drivers from those 4 teams, if you discount Sergio Perez, who's having a difficult weekend so far. There's at least 7 drivers who could effectively take pole here, and I genuinely could not tell you right now who's favourite.
It's going to be one to stick with, trust me on that. Just a few minutes away from getting Q1 underway. Andrew, FP3 wasn't without incident towards the end of the final practice session. There were sort of 2 main incidents, weren't there? One involving Lance Stroll and Lewis Hamilton, and the other involving Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris. Both were investigated. Do we know anything more on that?
We do. So they've both been given, Stroll and Leclerc, that is, a reprimand. What's interesting is that in the first incident, which is at turn 4, Leclerc admitted to the stewards that he deliberately wanted to send a message to Hamilton, and they declared his driving was erratic. And Leclerc, he says he misjudged the situation, didn't realise where Norris's car was in relation to his. They also made contact. That was on the run between turns 5 and turn 7, after Norris had inadvertently blocked Leclerc at turn 5. But again, another reprimand. I have to say, Harry, people get quite excited about these incidents in practice between drivers, and it was all a bit it was all a bit silly really at the end of the day, but it was very, very rare that any kind of penalty gets handed out for a practice incident, because the stewards decide basically that the consequences aren't big enough.
No, and it's certainly though an uncharacteristic move from Charles Leclerc there, but just reprimands for Leclerc and Stroll, so no penalties for them. There is one driver carrying a penalty over from the Canadian Grand Prix. That's Sergio Perez. He has a 3-place grid penalty, so no matter where he qualifies this afternoon, he will receive a 3-place grid drop.
And I tell you what, Harry, I think that's going to be one of the things that we look at rather earlier than we ought to during qualifying, because Sergio Perez has had a pretty bad weekend so far. He's been not far off a second slower than Max Verstappen so far. Even this morning, yesterday he admittedly was trying different setups, but he didn't seem to be doing any better this morning. And that's the sort of margin. If that carries over into qualifying, he's going to be certainly risking not getting into the top 10. It could even be worse than that. There have been Q1 sessions this year where the whole field's been covered by half a second. It's hard to imagine Perez could be a second off Verstappen in those circumstances, but he's at real risk of certainly not getting into the top 10, which will be continuing quite a bleak run for Sergio Perez at Red Bull.
Indeed, last 2 qualifyings Perez has been knocked out in Q1, and in the last 2 races he's failed to finish either of them. He's fallen to 5th in the Drivers' Championship, so Perez needs an uplift in form at the moment. But we are at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. It's still warm and dry, but there is overnight rain forecast as well, so that could be something dicey for the Grand Prix tomorrow. Air temperature at the moment just over 24 degrees, track temperature just over 37 degrees Celsius. In terms of the drivers and constructors points coming into round 10, it's Max Verstappen who leads the Drivers' Championship, 194 points to his name. He is 56 clear of Charles Leclerc in second, then it's Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz, as I said, Perez rounding out the top 5. And over in the Constructors' Championship, it is Red Bull who lead the way, 301 points 49 points clear of Ferrari. Then it's McLaren, Mercedes and Aston Martin, the top 5, with RB in 6th ahead of Haas. Alpine with double points last time out managed to jump Williams, who are 9th, and Sauber 10th and last, the only team yet to get off the points, yet to get off the mark with any points as it currently stands. But what is it about this track, Mark? Everybody knows it like the back of their hand, don't they?
Yeah, teams traditionally have spent a lot of time here either racing or even more so testing in the years gone by. When testing was free, this was a favourite place, partly because it tests a number of different elements of your car. It's got a lot of very high speed and medium speed, but fast sweeping corners that really shows up the sort of efficiency levels of your aerodynamics, which are crucial for this track. Also quite a tough place to manage tyre usage, pretty tough on tyres because of those long duration high speed corners. So these are all the kind of challenges that the teams and drivers are having to learn about through the practice sessions that we've so far had. Now's the time in this next qualifying hour where they really have to put all of that into practice. There's no more time for experimenting, really. This is where it matters.
It's crunch time for qualifying for the Spanish Grand Prix. Q1 underway already, 18 minutes and counting, already down to 16 minutes and 55 seconds with a few cars tentatively heading out onto their out laps. A reminder, the slowest 5 drivers at the end of the next 16 and a half minutes or so will be eliminated as we set the grid for the Spanish Grand Prix. So first cars out on track on that soft compounder tyre. Pirelli bringing the hardest compounds, the soft rubber, the red wall tyre being the quickest and the tyre of choice when it comes to qualifying. Ricciardo, Stroll, Tsunoda, Joe, Sargent all heading out first of all. Those drivers at risk because actually, the Saubers have been at the back, but even Aston Martin, Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso, Mark, are going to have to be they're going to have to find something extra if they want to kind of salvage their weekend so far.
Yeah, and even maybe their season. You know, they talked about the beginning of the season being in a battle with the likes of Mercedes. Mercedes, of course, were underperforming, but they were in the same ballpark as Aston Martin. They're only one place apart in the constructors' standings, as you said. But actually, it's Mercedes that have taken giant leaps forward. Their development path has been a lot more effective, particularly in the last couple of rounds. We're seeing it play out for real here. Mercedes looking like a genuine contender at the front. Aston Martin, seemingly, this idea of you sort of stand still in Formula One and you end up going backwards, and that seems to be what's happening to the Silverstone-based team.
Yeah, it certainly is. But Fernando Alonso, one of 2 home drivers on the grid, along with Carlos Sainz. Indeed, Alonso's last Formula One win came here back in 2013. It's been 185 Grand Prix since that day. A 2-time winner around here, of course, 2013, and then previously back in 2006 with the Renault Formula One team. Now, though, with that Silverstone-based team, Aston Martin, who are looking to try and get themselves back into contention. Lance Stroll also out there on track as well. He's got a best qualifying position of 5th around here. This time last year when Aston Martin flew out of the blocks at the beginning of the season. But first lap times coming in then. It's Logan Sargent fastest to 1:14.3. Zhou Guanyu in the Sauber is about to cross the line. He's just gone fastest of anybody in the final sector. It's 2nd overall, the first 2 lap times from Sargent and Zhou. But it's Daniel Ricciardo in the RB who is fastest of anybody in the middle sector. Both RB drivers having upgrades to their cars this weekend, and Daniel Ricciardo with a much improved performance in Canada a couple of weeks ago, but it's that consistency that he needs so far, especially in FP3 this morning. He had the better of his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, and indeed he goes fastest in these early stages of 1:13.7.
Yeah, he seems to be carrying that form, at least at this point through, in that he seems the more comfortable of those 2 drivers. So on those first flying laps for both RB drivers, it's Ricciardo that definitely is the more comfortable and the quickest. None of the major players really come out to play yet in this session. There's still just under 14 minutes to go. We've got Ricciardo from Stroll, who's just crossed the line and put a lap in on the soft tyres, from Tsunoda, from Sargent, and then it's Zhou. And everybody else now just about thinking of emerging from their garages and finding a spot on this racetrack to deliver the quickest lap they possibly can.
So why the wait for these guys?
Well, the circuit definitely gets quicker and quicker as the more and more rubber goes down. We know that. Of course, there is the idea that you can get out early, which the back one at the back of the end of the grid have done, to try and get themselves a clear point on the circuit. The later we go in this session, when all 20 cars end up on the track at the same time, traffic will be an issue. So there's a risk you play here by leaving it late, in that you may not get the flying lap you need. By going out now, as most of them are starting to do, you will get at least 2 clear runs, and that should be absolutely fine for most people to find their way through, certainly inside the top 15.
Yeah, it's a high-speed circuit, as you say, high-degradation circuit. It's flowing, it's tough on the driver's neck and the body because of the long, fast corners, especially coming through the right-hander of turn 3 into turn 4, and then a little bit later into the middle sector of the lap, the fast right-hander of turn 9, which leads you on to the back straight, with the G-forces are quite intense on the driver's body. This 14-turn track, 8 turns to the right, 6 to the left, just over 4.6 kilometres, 2.8 miles, and it is starting to get a little bit congested towards the end of the pit lane as the 2 Ferraris try and filter their way out, along with Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin. I think there was an Alpine in there as well of Esteban Ocon, and the Sauber of Valtteri Bottas, all just trying to find themselves a gap by slowing down at the end of the pit lane. It's something we've sort of got used to this season now.
Well, the rule makers have clamped down in recent times about the idea of slowing down on the racetrack to find yourself a gap. So they are now penalising people for going unnecessarily slow out on the track, because of course it raises a potential safety risk with guys on a flying lap coming up with a massive speed differential against those trying to find positions. So the result of that is people now delay their exit from the pit lane, so you end up with a huge queue at the end of the pit lane, so that the slow part, the finding or creating the gap, can be done in the pit lane before they actually officially enter the racetrack.
Grandstand's absolutely packed to witness qualifying for the Spanish Grand Prix. Just under 11.5 minutes left of this first part, Q1, where the slowest 5 drivers will be eliminated. Indeed, only 5 drivers have so far set a lap time, but quick times are now starting to come in. Sergio Perez, fastest of anybody in the middle sector, a driver that carries a 3-place grid penalty and needs a good run. He cannot afford to have another consecutive Q1 knockout, although he does have a 2-year contract now in his back pocket. Round the final corner, this is the sound of the Mexican driver, who goes to the top of the timings, a 1:13.0, but there are cars still out on track going quicker. Max Verstappen now fastest of anybody in the middle sector and sector 1. Lewis Hamilton on a lap 2 going well. Oscar Piastri also finding time in his McLaren.
Yeah, and a decent lap from Alex Albon. 3/10 behind Sergio Perez, but that's a pretty strong showing from the Williams, early though it is in the session. But yeah, we've certainly got guys going quickly, and for the first time in a number of races, we can genuinely say that the likes of Mercedes are in this fight. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell both showing huge potential over the course of the weekend, and the lap times, as they are halfway round their laps right now, starting to show up well.
Well, we thought Perez was on an okay lap, but Verstappen has just gone fastest. The gap between Verstappen and Perez over 7.5 tenths of a second, split now by Oscar Piastri, who himself is only 7 tenths back from Verstappen as well. That is a big margin for Max Verstappen to have in these early stages. Lewis Hamilton slots into second place. Again, though, he's 7 tenths back from Max Verstappen.
That lap from Verstappen, that by far the quickest lap we've seen all weekend so far, by far. I can't remember what the fastest was exactly, but Norris has almost just matched it. So everybody going quicker and quicker now, and that is a really strong showing from Lando Norris in the McLaren.
Yeah, really good lap from Lando Norris. Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, the 2 Ferraris, coming through the middle sector now. They're on okay laps too, so watch out and see where they slot in. Alonso comes over the line in 6th. The 2 Alpines have been running fairly nicely. Ocon crosses the line and goes 7th fastest in these early stages, immediately displaced by Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber. So the track gearing up all the time. There is track evolution here, more and more grip that comes down, but it's the Ferraris that are flying. Charles Leclerc is fastest of anybody in the middle sector, and he goes to the top spot. But what about his teammate Carlos Sainz, who comes across the line? Can't quite match his teammate. It's Leclerc with a 1:12.2 goes fastest, then Verstappen half a tenth behind. Norris 3rd, Sainz 4th, Hülkenberg up into 5th, then comes Hamilton in 6th, Piastri 7th, Perez 8th, Alonso and Bottas rounding out the top 10.
That's a great lap from Hulkenberg. Great lap from Gasly as well, up into 5th. So 7/10, which sounds like an awful lot, but that's a match for the likes of Hamilton at the moment, for George Russell in that ballpark. I still think there's more to come from Lewis Hamilton in that newly modified and revamped Mercedes, where they seem to have turned the corner. But the leaders, the two Ferraris, the McLaren of Lando Norris and Max Verstappen in that Red Bull, blistering laps to set this session alight.
0.2 of a second separate the top 5 in this Q1 session, but we're more focused on who will be eliminated. Everybody from 16th place down will be knocked out of this part in qualifying, and at the moment Yuki Tsunoda needs to do better. He's right on the limit. He's only 1,000th off Alex Albon's time as he crosses the line, but it's only enough for 16th place for the Japanese driver. He's at risk, so too is Zhou Guanyu, Kevin Magnussen, Daniel Ricciardo coming through the middle sector now. He's up on Albon's time to get through into Q2, but not by much. Logan Sargent at the back and quite a way off the pace, but he's on another lap at the moment and finding some more time as the American in his second season for Williams. But what can Ricciardo have around the final corner? Sweeps round the arcing right-hander. DRS flap flies open, 15th fastest for the Aussie. Just about gets through, but he'll have to go again.
Yeah, probably not enough for Ricciardo. He's right on the cusp at the moment, but importantly, once again, he beats his teammate, and that inter-team battle is a really important one down at RB. There are positions and places on the grid very much up for grabs for next year, and between those two guys, they are absolutely fighting for them. Daniel Ricciardo needs a good showing against his teammate, and so far this weekend, he seems to just about have the edge.
Sargent finds a bit more time, but unfortunately still 20th and last, and quite a way, half a second off Kevin Magnussen in 19th. Magnussen in the pits at the moment. His Stroll on the radio.
Fully impeded by the Williams. Yeah, it was like good. I'll have a look.
That's coming into turn 10, Mark. Impeded?
Yeah, I think it's a fair shout. Came up into the braking zone, and the Williams of Sargent going slowly in his way. He didn't necessarily get so close that it became a sort of safety risk at that point, but it did compromise his lap, and that was something that the stewards are going to take a closer look at.
Okay, just over 6 minutes left of Q1. It's Leclerc with the fastest time, a 1:12.2. Half a tenth separates him and Max Verstappen. Then comes Norris, Sainz. Russell is in 5th. 2/10 separate the top 5. Gasly's in 6th with a great lap from the Alpine. So too from the Hulkenberg. Haas in 7th. Hamilton is 8th. Piastri, Perez in 10th. Alonso, Bottas, Stroll, Ocon, Ricciardo, the top 15. It's the top 15 who get to go through to Q2. And then in that elimination zone, Alex Albon, who has just come out of the pits on his outlap to get another go on the soft tyres. He'll need to go again. So too will Yuki Tsunoda and Zhou Guanyu, along with Kevin Magnussen and Logan Sargent. Those are the drivers at risk. But, Mark, I think it's fair to say that those are the drivers we also kind of expected to be there at this stage.
Yeah, I think so. No major surprises down there. I think what is a potential surprise is that if we look at the top few teams, other than Ferrari, each of those top teams have got one driver that's at the moment still out of position. I'm looking at Hamilton, who's a long way behind his teammate. I'm looking at Piastri, a long way off the pace of Lando Norris. And I'm looking at Sergio Perez, who is a mile away from his teammate, almost a second, nearly 8/10. Max Verstappen ahead of his teammate Perez. All of those drivers need to do better, because what their teammates have done is show the potential of the car. They now need to live up to that.
Perez knocked out in Q2 in Imola, knocked out in Q1 in Monaco, knocked out in Q1 in Canada. And that's all off the back of signing a shiny new contract to extend his stay as Max Verstappen's teammate at Red Bull. At the moment, he is in 10th, but he is 8/10 of a second of Charles Leclerc's fastest lap time. And more often than not, in the closing stages where the times really start to speed up, is often Perez who finds himself on the wrong side of that elimination zone and out. So he will be watching like a hawk, and we'll expect to see the Mexican driver out on track to join the likes of Alex Albon. So too is Zhou Guanyu out there again, along with Kevin Magnussen. They are all at risk at the moment and need to go again. But Albon just making his way now to downhill towards turn 7 and then uphill through the right-hand kink of 8. Not finding a huge amount of lap time at the moment.
No, he's not, and he's got a very much a clear track in front of him. He's got everything there to deliver the perfect lap, but he hasn't managed to do it. He's just about on the cusp, and it's Daniel Ricciardo, the guy who's immediately at risk in P15. Albon currently in 16. He's just about in that middle sector, found enough as we speak to just pip Daniel Ricciardo. Coming through the final sector now, this is the thing that's going to really turn this 16th position into a safe position or not. He's coming out the final corner and he does it up into P12. Decent run.
1:13.1 for Alex Albon, the Thai driver who has reached Q3 at the last 2 races, managed to get his first points of the season, and Williams his first points of the season a few weeks ago back in Monaco after a fantastic qualifying effort. At the moment, through. That's the sound of Sergio Perez on an outlap and making his way through the left-hander of turn 10, gearing up for what will probably be his last flying lap to cement his position through into Q2. But there is pressure on the Mexican shoulder. So too for Fernando Alonso, who finds himself just behind Perez in 11th. He's on an outlap at the moment as well in the Aston Martin.
So Perez and Hamilton have had to take an extra set of soft tyres, a new set to do these laps to make sure that they don't get eliminated in this session. So assuming they get through, that's going to put them at a disadvantage later on to Leclerc, Verstappen, Norris, Sainz and Russell, who've all stayed in the pits for these final minutes of the session and obviously feel that they don't need to improve.
Yeah, top 5 think they're fine. Everybody else is out on track with the exception of Logan Sargent, who was 20th and last. Perhaps an issue on that Williams car, but he is not out at the moment. And as I say that, he does come out on an outlap. So Sargent will get one last go at it to try and improve his position. Sergio Perez finding time in sector 1, but he's not going too quickly at 21.7 in the first sector. Let's see what his middle sector split time is like as he comes down into the braking zone for the left-hander of turn 10. 2/10 off Leclerc, a little closer. Needs to try and keep that gap as close to 2/10 as possible as he arcs round the right-hander of turn 12.
Yeah, so there's still lap time in the track. It's not slowed up. We're still seeing people improve. In fact, lots of people. Oscar Piastri with a decent first part of the lap as well. As Perez comes around to close out his lap, it's only good enough for 6th. It'll see him safely through, of course. So 1:12.4, just over that 2/10 gap away from Leclerc. So still not close enough to his teammate, but enough to see him through to Q2, I'm pretty sure.
And 2 good laps as well from the Sauber drivers who slot in behind. Valtteri Bottas half a second off Leclerc in 7th. Zhou Guanyu only a further 10th of a second behind in 8th. Few upgrades brought to the Sauber team. Zhou Guanyu also reverting to an old chassis to try and find some more performance. Esteban Ocon slots up into 7th spot in the Alpine, but Lewis Hamilton is finding time too. He's fastest of anybody in the middle sector. He's down in 13th at the moment. Piastri also needs to find time in the other McLaren. He's been shafted down, but now has just crossed the line and gone up into 6th. A good lap from the Australian. What's it going to be though for Lewis Hamilton around the final corner? Sparks flying from the underside of that Mercedes to the DRS line. The rear wing flap opens. Hamilton to the top of the times at the end of Q1. A 1:12.4 for the 7-time champion and the 6-time winner around this very circuit. Ricciardo will be next to cross the line. It's only enough for 15th. Fernando Alonso needs to find some more time too. He's up on time in the middle sector, but right now the Spaniard is facing elimination in this Q1. Albon will be out. He won't get another go. The 2 Aston Martins find themselves right at the bottom of the times at the moment, but can Fernando Alonso find some time in front of his home fans? Yes, he can. He gets through into Q2. Alonso slots up into 9th spot. That puts Ricciardo down into Q1. Gasly gets through into the next stage of qualifying. The 2 Alpines looking much improved around this circuit. Lance Stroll in the 2nd Aston Martin next to cross the line, down on time in the middle sector. Hulkenberg's the man at risk if Stroll goes quicker. Yes, he does. Stroll does go quicker, but only enough for 14th. Yuki Tsunoda is next, his teammate down in the bottom part of this timing screens, and he will not progress through into the next stage of qualifying. He will out-qualify his teammate though. Magnussen won't make it through either, and Hulkenberg just about made it through too, up into 12th. Logan Sargent, the last man to come across the line, and what's it going to be for the American? He's 20th and last at the moment, 9/10 off the pace. He finds time, but it's still plumb last. The 2 Williams right at the back in 19th and 20th.
Well, dramatic closing part of Q1. Hulkenberg, I thought, was pretty impressive towards the end there, just pipping his teammate, in fact knocking his teammate out and into that elimination zone. So it's Hulkenberg that sails through. But Lewis Hamilton with an absolutely stonking lap. We know he took an extra set of those soft tyres, as Andrew Benson told us earlier on, so there's a cost that may well come back to bite him later on with that.
That was a good lap.
Yeah, it was Yuki. Fortunately, it was not enough. But yeah, this is what we had.
We didn't go through?
Negative.
No, man, come on.
Afraid not, Yuki. It might have been a good lap, but the two RBs both seem to be struggling around this circuit. Tsunoda, though, does out-qualify his teammate Daniel Ricciardo, but absolutely nothing in it. Magnussen gets out of his Haas. Once again, out-qualified by his teammate, but only half a tenth of a second separated Magnussen from getting through into the next stage of qualifying. Tsunoda 17th ahead of his teammate Ricciardo, and the two Williamses of Albon and Sargent 19th and 20th. Those are the first to fall in this qualifying session.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. We talked earlier on about this circuit being really quite tough on tyres, and so therefore the sort of benefit of taking a fresh set, which we saw Lewis Hamilton do, is quite exaggerated around here. The energy that you can put through a brand new set of tyres on that one flying lap that qualifying needs is quite considerable. So that will have given him that advantage, but it will also give him huge confidence to know that he was able to deliver that when it really mattered.
Yeah, it's been a painful weekend, guys. I'm trying my best.
Yeah, good job.
Keep pushing tomorrow.
Exactly, never give up.
That was Logan Sargent, who looks like he is on the brink of losing his Williams seat, maybe even before the end of this season, but has struggled for pace. But both Williams are off the pace here in Barcelona.
Well, they are, but Alexander Albon, his teammate, although he's 19th, he didn't go out for a second run, and he's still nearly 4/10 quicker than Sargent. So it's no wonder Sargent sounds a bit despondent in that car. He's really just not quick enough. It's as simple as that.
You are right, but there is a caveat, and we don't know the full extent to it either, is that they're not always the same spec of car, are Sargent and Albon. The upgrades always go on Alex Albon's car, and last few races Logan Sargent hasn't had a fully updated Williams. But you're absolutely right, it has been a struggle of a season so far for Logan Sargent. Alex Albon will be really disappointed with his qualifying as well. Ricciardo much closer to Tsunoda, but still behind him.
I think he'll be disappointed with that, because he has been quicker pretty much all weekend so far, and it's only when it came to it in qualifying, when it really matters, that he didn't manage to nail a decent enough lap to pip his teammate. Not a huge amount in it, about a tenth, but even so, those little inter-team battles, particularly for those two, as I mentioned earlier, really matter at the moment, and I think another knock of the confidence that will give him.
That's two Saubers through into Q2. Bottas and Zhou separated by around about a tenth of a second, so good runs for them.
It's just made Carlos Sainz's decision all the harder, hasn't it? The two Williamses at the back of the grid and the Saubers into Q2.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be Carlos Sainz right now. You're sort of choosing between a rock and a hard place there, aren't you? But yeah, last time the best qualifyings for Sauber, you've got to go back to really China, where the Chinese sprint race, really. Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas both inside the top 10 on that occasion. Since then, it's been all pain, no gain for the two Sauber drivers, so they'll be hoping to cement their position in Q2. Nico Hülkenberg once again showing that he is a master of qualifying, and it kind of further cements Kevin Magnussen. Okay, half a tenth away from Q2, but he's just not a qualifying driver, is he? He's not good. He doesn't have the one lap pace.
No, I think we can all say that if you want to pick a strength for K-Mag, it's the race, isn't it? It's when he comes alive in the race. He's often done the team role, as we talked about yesterday, perhaps occasionally uncomfortably, but I think he offers excitement in the race. And I think that's always an element that I think some teams do look at. The guy that is willing to go for a gap. Sometimes with Kevin, that gap wasn't fully there, and he's come a cropper as a result of that. But he's always exciting, and I kind of like that. I have some respect for that.
Well, you can't accuse him of not being a team player. There's a reason he's on 10 penalty points and 2 away from a one race ban. But he is having to fight for that seat next year. We expect Oliver Bearman, the young British Formula 2 driver, to be in, what would have been Hülkenberg's car, but it is not a shoo-in that Kevin Magnussen will be there either. But he's a man of experience, and I suppose Haas, well, they know what they've got with him.
Yeah, exactly right. That is a key factor. They know what they've got, and as we have talked about earlier in the weekend, changing both drivers can be something that's quite destabilising. So we will wait to see. There's a lot of movement in the driver market that's on the brink of unfolding, and actually it's Carlos Sainz making his mind up on where he goes. That might just be the thing that brings the stack of cards tumbling down.
Well, just in that middling part where we wait for Q2 to get underway, lots of sports across the 5 Live network this afternoon, continuing live coverage over on BBC Radio 5 Live right now of the Euros in Germany, Georgia and the Czech Republic. That game in its about 63rd minute, 1-1 at the moment. Later on, from 5 o'clock on 5 Live, Turkey and Portugal play, and then 8 o'clock this evening it's Belgium against Romania, and that's all on 5 Live. Tomorrow on 5 Live you'll hear the race. We'll be doing our build-up coverage from 1:30 in the afternoon ahead of Lights Out from 2 o'clock for the Spanish Grand Prix, and that'll be live on BBC Radio 5 Live. But right now you are listening to qualifying for the Spanish Grand Prix, and wherever you're listening to this too, did you know that you can now listen to our F1 coverage on your smart speaker? All you have to do is ask BBC Sounds to play Spanish Grand Prix qualifying, and you'll get us on your smart speaker. Don't say we don't treat you. Right, Q2 underway then. Green light on at the end of the pit lane, and already down to 14 minutes and 10 seconds. And straight out, it's the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll as it starts to cloud over a bit more, Mark, doesn't it?
A little bit, yeah. Temperature down at 24 degrees, a little bit cooler than it was yesterday, but still perfectly okay. No dramatic change from this morning. The guys that we're really keeping a close eye on here, of course, are the 2 Alpines that have got themselves through into Q2, the 2 Saubers, of course, as you said, and the Haas of Hülkenberg. They're in those positions at the end of that session between 11 and 15. The guys really at risk, and I suspect it's likely to be those guys, but you can keep a close eye on someone like Sergio Perez, who only really just made it through inside the top 10, and is definitely somebody who is potentially at risk. We talked about he's got a grid penalty, but he needs to be as far up the grid, obviously, to minimise the impact of that grid penalty on the race. So he's one that I'm keeping a very close eye on, because he needs to get a lot closer to his teammate, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. He's only got a best qualifying here of 4th back in 2020. Finished on the podium in 2nd. That's his best race result here back in 2022. But in this next part of qualifying, we focus on the next 5 drivers to be eliminated. So everybody down from 11th to 15th. Basically, it's try and get in the top 10 within the next 13 minutes. But no one in a rush to go out. Lance Stroll then clearly just wanting to get out there, get a clear piece of track. He's been struggling in that Aston Martin. Is that really the logic behind that? Well,
he also, don't forget, he fell victim to not having a clear track. He was hampered by the Williams early, so he's got some recent experience of what it feels like to have your flying lap hampered. So taking advantage of no one else being out at the moment. He's got the whole tracks for himself. He's on his flying lap. That's the sound you can hear in the background. Throwing his Aston Martin around this racetrack, the green Aston Martin that's really not been quite developed to the same level that many of their competitors have been. Even his own teammate Fernando Alonso calling on his team Aston Martin to up their development game, which is something they really need to do if they want to stay in any kind of fight with the teams around them.
Making his way through the left-hander of turn 7, then the right-hand kink of 8 brings you uphill towards one of the fastest corners on the track, the right-hander of turn 9. As you approach the back straight, the DRS becomes activated, the rear wing opens before it slams shut under braking for the left-hander of turn 10, experiencing almost 5 G's as you make your way through the corner. Then comes the quite long arcing corners that make up the final sector. The right-hander of 12 sees you into the right-hander of 13. Then it's the final arcing right-hander of turn 14 that sees off a lap and across the line. For Lance Stroll, it's a 1:13.630 on his first attempt, and as he crosses the line, cue traffic in the pit lane. 2 McLarens, 2 Ferraris and 2 Red Bulls make their way out into the fast lane, try and sort themselves out for a bit of track space on the circuit.
Yeah, so this is where it's going to get interesting. Everybody looking for a bit of space. Of course, they had to see the end of Lance Stroll's lap so that they made sure they weren't impeding him as they emerged from the pit lane. But now everyone's trying to find a gap, taking their time about it. Long queue of cars in the pit lane, just creeping forward at walking pace. But when these guys finally make their way out, they'll spend a lap preparing things like the fresh tyres that most of them are running, soft tyres on everybody's car at the moment, the fastest of the three available from Pirelli this weekend. They'll spend the lap warming up tyres, getting brakes at the right temperature, keeping the power unit temperatures all under control, and getting themselves prepared for that one opportunity, the one flying lap. 10 minutes on the clock. This is where it has to happen. They've got to deliver.
I love the idea of, excuse me, all the drivers sitting in their garage watching Lance Stroll's lap before they went out there to make sure they didn't impede him. I'm sure that's what they were all thinking there as they do emerge out of the pit lane and Stroll making his way back around the final corner now as he'll, I imagine, come into the pit lane and won't want to get in everybody's way, but they trundle out then. So it is the fight to get into the top 10. We've got two Saubers fighting tooth and nail, two Alpines, so I think we'll be quite buoyed by their progress so far this weekend. Nico Hülkenberg has proven himself to be quite the master of a one-lap pace, especially in that Haas. So there could be a few outliers, a few upsets here, particularly for the likes of Sergio Perez, as we mentioned, but also Fernando Alonso as well on the bubble at the end of Q1.
Yeah, everybody now making their way out on track, other than the two Mercedes who are taking their time to emerge from the garage. We know that Lewis Hamilton has one less set of the fresh soft tyres than everybody else, having used an extra set to find his way through from Q3 into Q2, so maybe he wants to minimise his runs. They are now just starting to emerge. Hamilton emerging from the pit lane. Russell, I'm sure, won't be far behind him, but this is going to be really interesting because as Q2 and then certainly into Q1, I genuinely have no idea who's going to be quickest here. It's that close.
Well, we can see what trouble Sergio Perez is in already, because although he's looking purple on the timing screens as it tracks him around his laps, so is Esteban Ocon. So it seems like he's not going that much quicker than Ocon's Alpine, which for a Red Bull is not really, you'd really not expect it.
That's right, you're absolutely right. Perez's lap already being superseded by those around him. In fact, lots of other people going quicker at different parts of the lap. So yeah, not good enough, I think, from Perez as Ocon completes his lap with a 1:12.3. Decent lap actually from Ocon, but I don't think it's going to be quick enough.
Yeah, only a tenth or so between Perez and Ocon, who crosses the line, and Perez does go fastest, a 1:12.2, but for Ocon it was a 1:12.3, so a good lap from Ocon on the Alpine. Let's see what his teammate can do. Gasly, fastest of anybody in the middle sector, was a little bit out wide coming through the final corner, kicks up the dust, but he goes fastest, a 1:12.1, quicker than Sergio Perez by less than a tenth. And that is not a good start to Sergio Perez's Q2 efforts. It's Gasly, Perez, Hülkenberg, Ocon, Stroll, the 5 drivers to set a lap time. This is the sound of Stroll's teammate Fernando Alonso around the final corner, flat out and to the line for Alonso, 5th fastest, a 1:12.5.
We've got some very quick laps coming from the likes of Oscar Piastri in the McLaren, Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, Charles Leclerc in the other Ferrari, George Russell even putting in a strong lap. So those guys that we would expect to be up there, all about to deliver. It's going to be very interesting to see who comes out on top. Piastri, though, looking very quick at the moment.
Piastri fastest of anybody in the middle sector. Carlos Sainz, though, fastest of anybody in the first and second sectors. His teammate Charles Leclerc crosses the line to go fastest, the 1:12.0, but Sainz is absolutely flying on home soil. But what can Oscar Piastri do? He comes across the line. He's next to top the times, a 1:12.0, less than half a tenth between himself and Charles Leclerc. But Carlos Sainz is currently a rocket ship and goes over a tenth clear at the top. Carlos Sainz to the top of the times, but Max Verstappen is currently fastest of anybody in the middle sector. Lando Norris will cross the line before him, and by 0.02 of a second, Norris takes over as the fastest driver on the circuit. But never rule out the Dutchman. What's he got? He's got 0.2 in his pocket. He goes to the top, a 1:11.6 for Verstappen.
That is an unbelievably fast lap from Verstappen, from everybody actually in the top 4 or 5, but Verstappen especially. By far the quickest lap we've seen all weekend. He's taken another couple of 3 or 4 tenths off what he did in Q3. That is a stonking lap from Verstappen and a real benchmark for everybody else to chase. There is going to be time, of course, for another lap for everybody with just under 6 minutes on the clock, so it's not over yet.
Russell crosses the line in 6th. Wanting more from that Mercedes, both drivers will be. Russell 6th and Hamilton currently down in 13th, and he's not on a lap at the moment. Let's hear from him.
This tire was bad.
Okay, copy.
So he's out on the soft tyre, but of course, remember in Q1 he had to take an extra set, and so Andrew, are we already seeing the effects of that as he'll be one down compared to the others?
That was a used tyre Hamilton was on for that run, so that would explain that. But Russell wasn't on a used tyre, and he's half a second down on Verstappen, so that's not that encouraging for Mercedes and their sort of hopes of being in the mix with the top 4, even if he is 6th. He's only just fractionally ahead of Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. Sergio Perez is still hanging on to the top 10 by the skin of his teeth in 8th place, but that was at the very front of the field. That was a forbidding looking lap from Max Verstappen.
Less than 5 minutes remain of Q2. It is Verstappen fastest by 0.2 of a second to Lando Norris. Then it's Carlos Sainz, Oscar Piastri and Charles Leclerc, who are the top 5. George Russell in 6th, ahead of Pierre Gasly, who'll be very happy with that lap in his Alpine in 7th. Perez, as Andrew said, still clinging on in 8th. Hülkenberg will also be happy with his efforts in 9th, and Esteban Ocon hoping to make it 2 Alpines into Q3, just on the cusp, and currently set for elimination would be Valtteri Bottas, but only a tenth between himself and safety. Fernando Alonso down in 12th. The 2 Aston Martins both in that knockout zone at the moment. Lewis Hamilton on that used compound tyre on the soft, not happy. He's down in 13th. Zhou Guanyu, the slowest of the drivers in his Sauber, and 1.5 seconds off the pace. But all quiet out on track, except of course for Lance Stroll, who only likes to go out on the track when there's nobody else there, as he makes his way through the left-hander of turn 5.
It stops him driving into people, Harry, doesn't it?
Set you up for that one nicely.
I think if you're Lewis Hamilton, I'm not sure you're too concerned. We saw what a difference a fresh set of tyres can make in the first qualifying session. He put them on, of course, earlier than most other people, but we're now about to see that. He's back in the garage. He'll get that fresh set onto the car, and we should now see a similar level of performance hike in Hamilton than we saw earlier on. So that's something that I'm sure will get him through into Q3. But I think what you will find for most of the drivers around the top 5 or 6, those guys we all thought were contenders, they'll all be looking at Verstappen thinking there's 2 tenths there. Now, every one of those drivers will probably be back in the garage saying, well, I've got a little bit here, there's a tiny bit I could do there, ran and ride a tiny bit there, but we're talking about a tenth here or there, max. To find another 2 tenths, that's an enormous ask for everybody who's already left everything out on the table, and I think that lap from Verstappen will have opened quite a few people's eyes.
Yeah, I mean, it's small margins, isn't it? That's how tight it is at the moment. Stroll just crossed the line and got himself up into the top 10. Everybody else out on track, bar the top 6 drivers. That's Verstappen, Norris, Sainz, Piastri, Leclerc, Russell. I imagine Russell will want to go out again, surely. He's not going to stay in the pits for the next 2.5 minutes.
No, I would be surprised. I think what you have to do is you look at the people behind him. Who's a threat to him? It's his own teammate in Hamilton, who's well out of position. Alonso potentially, but you could also look at Ocon. You wouldn't normally say there'd be a threat, but at the moment they're showing signs of pace, and Gasly's in and around that area. So actually Russell, I think, does need to come out again. It would be a big risk to try and sit this one out.
And on cue, he does indeed come out along with Oscar Piastri. They have decided they need to run again. 2 minutes on the clock as Lewis Hamilton embarks on his final fly. He's currently at risk of elimination. He's down in 14th, needs to find time. Didn't like the last set of tyres. He was on a used set of softs and now arcs his way through the fast right-hander of turn 3 before it straightens up into the braking zone for turn 4. Slightly downhill braking, a little bit off camber as you find the apex quite late before you turn into the right-hander, and then already you're heading downhill. through the left-hander of turn 5. Then it's a short jaunt towards turn 6 and 7 before then you head back uphill through the more technical sector of this track before the fast right-hander of turn 9 beckons.
So out of the top 5, Charles Leclerc has not come out again, and he's 5th, and he's slower than Oscar Piastri, who has come out again. So
that's a gamble.
That's exactly
Brave.
what I was going to say. That is a bit brave, I would say. He doesn't have to save tyres, because he saved tyres in the first session, so there's no benefit from that. There's just risk. So let's see how that plays out for Ferrari.
Hamilton round the final corner. It's a personal best in sector 1 and 2, and he goes second fastest. Lewis Hamilton up to P2, a 1:11.7, about a tenth off Max Verstappen. So does that send troubled tones for the likes of Charles Leclerc, who didn't come out? Sergio Perez is out on track and is currently right on the bubble and at risk of elimination. Ocon's going well. Gasly's going well on the first sector too.
Leclerc could really be in trouble here, because Russell's going quicker than him, fastest lap of anybody so far halfway round. Gasly also going quicker, Perez going quicker, who's behind him as well. Leclerc could very quickly find himself right on the bubble here, and that is not a position Ferrari need to be in.
Ocon goes up to 7th, just behind Leclerc, so that might provide a little bit of respite for Charles Leclerc. Hulkenberg won't prove a threat. He will be consigned to 12th at the moment. Perez is down on 11th, needs to find time. Gasly crosses the line. The Frenchman goes up into 7th at the moment. Both Alpine set for a Q3 appearance. Sergio Perez crosses the line. He can only manage 7th. Leclerc just ahead of him, still safe. George Russell is flying out on track. He's currently in 10th and needs to find time. Alonso too, down in 14th spot behind his teammate, who will not get another lap either. What can Fernando Alonso do? What can George Russell do? Alonso will come to the line first, and it won't be Q3 for Fernando Alonso. It'll be 11th. George Russell to the line, matches and gets up to 3rd place, just a few hundredths of a second behind his teammate Lewis Hamilton. Both Mercedes making their way through in the closing stages. Nobody else going on a flying lap. That is the checkered flag for Q2, and it is Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin out in 11th, ahead of Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber 12th. Nico Hulkenberg's Haas is 13th. Lance Stroll's Aston Martin is 14th, and the Sauber of Zhou Guanyu 15th.
Yeah, so a risky call from Ferrari and Leclerc, but actually it was the two Alpines, Gasly and Ocon, who've been really, really quick so far this weekend, just putting laps in that left them behind. And then Sergio Perez massively underperforming once more. That's what's kept Leclerc safe, but he does sail through into the final part of qualifying, and they get away with it, and he'll have an extra set of tyres. Whether there's any scope to use those, we don't yet know, but he's through.
Well, as one Spaniard gets eliminated in Q2, Fernando Alonso waves to the grandstands, I think making the best of the equipment that he has at his disposal. The fans still have Carlos Sainz to support, and he is right in the mix, finishing that session in 5th. But both Alpines making it through will be set for their first double top 10 start all season long. Flavio Briatore having an immediate effect, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Who knows? I think what's really nice about that session and what we're seeing unfold here, but it's really nice, by the way, to see Mercedes both up there and in this fight. You know, for everybody at Mercedes who's been through so much struggle, it's really nice to see them back in the game. I think also Lando Norris definitely in the mix here. Piastri not quite matching his teammate, but the Ferraris didn't quite deliver. We didn't see Leclerc out on track, of course, but I think there's more to come. So this is close. It is still Verstappen's, I think, to lose, because that lap was so good. We're still a tenth and a half away from anybody matching that, but it's close enough to put a real fight on our hands here.
Sergio Perez ended up 8th, and I mean, I know I hate sort of banging on this drum, but he's got a 3-place grid penalty. If he's to qualify there, that is trouble. That is a long race for Sergio Perez.
Yeah, really, on a circuit that, you know, you can overtake on, but it's not that easy. And also in a championship fight where Red Bull absolutely need both of their drivers in it, particularly when their main rivals are typically having 2 drivers in the fight against them. So they need Sergio Perez to up his game.
That's the voice of the former F1 mechanic Mark Priestley, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. We've also got the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson with us in the commentary box, and we've had Q1 and Q2, and we now wait for the top 10 shootout and the fight for pole position for the Spanish Grand Prix. A reminder who is out then: Fernando Alonso out in 11th ahead of Bottas, Hülkenberg, Stroll and Zhou Guanyu 15th. Then it was Kevin Magnussen in 16th ahead of Tsunoda and his RB teammate Ricciardo, with the two Williams lining up on the back row. Alex Albon ahead of Logan Sargent. Through to Q3 then, we've got two Red Bulls, Verstappen and Perez, two Ferraris of Sainz and Leclerc, two Mercedes of Hamilton and Russell, two McLarens of Norris and Piastri, and two Alpines of Gasly and Ocon. It is 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. And, Alpine will be buoyed to be up there with their, what should be their rivals when it comes to manufacturers within the Formula One Championship. I don't expect them to really get higher than 9th and 10th, but either way, that would be a great result for Alpine at this stage.
Yeah, it really would. Off the back of what was also a pretty decent result out in Canada, in Montreal a couple of weeks ago. So, I want to say the tide turning. I still think they're struggling. I still think they are not where they really ought to be and want to be. But these are the kind of results that give everybody in the entire team, the factory, together with those at the circuit, an enormous lift. And that's important too.
You can hear the cheers from the fans in the grandstand. Actually, a lot of Oscar Piastri fans in the stands around here. Currently 6th fastest, and he's a little bit off his teammate. And he ended that session just ahead of Leclerc, but Leclerc didn't come out again right at the end. Pick for pole then, Mr. Priestley.
I genuinely couldn't call it, but that lap from Verstappen, I just think has opened people's eyes. I think it's an unbelievable lap, and it's come out of, I sort of want to say it's come out of nowhere, has it really? Because we've seen Verstappen do this over and over again, but I think he's surprised a few people, especially me.
Mr. Benson?
Verstappen, for sure. I mean, the Ferraris might be able to compete with him, I suppose, but the Mercedes didn't even beat him, and they ran later in the session when the track would have improved quite a lot, as we saw all the other drivers improve on their last runs. I'm expecting Verstappen to be on pole by a couple of tenths, and I have to say, Harry, that's not what we wanted to see with the next 4 or 5 races in Europe coming up in terms of a close competition at the front of the field.
Well, let's just see how it all pans out, shall we, in the next 12 or so minutes when we get Q3 underway. It is always mighty Max Verstappen who, when he just might look like he's got competition, finds those 2 extra tenths that he needs to put himself firmly back in the hunt. But the two Mercedes are right there. Hamilton was ahead of George Russell in that Q2 session, and of course Hamilton is behind Russell when it comes to qualifying head-to-head. 8-1 he's been beaten by George Russell, I'm sure, after the Canadian Grand Prix, where he was quite unhappy at the end of that race with Lewis Hamilton. He'll get a little bit of satisfaction if he's able to out-qualify teammate George Russell this afternoon.
Yeah, he really will, and he does seem quite happy and comfortable in the car. I think if you go back to Montreal, there was a huge amount of focus on George Russell come the end of that race, wasn't there? I mean, he even had an opportunity to win it at one point. He was in the mix, he was in the fight. There was, in all the big incidents, George was there or thereabouts, whereas Lewis not so much. So I think there was a little bit of focus on his teammate over Lewis, and I think it'll be nice for him and his own confidence. And look, we can look at Lewis Hamilton, say 7-time world champion, all the experience in the world. He still suffers with knocks to his confidence like anybody else. Having worked with him, I can tell you that, from up close and personal, he's an emotional character, and he gets affected. His emotions, play out in the way that he drives at times. So he needs the confidence boost like anybody else on this planet, and I think what's just happened over the last session or two will do just that for him.
Well, we're at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya, for round 10 of the Formula One World Championship. You're listening to qualifying ahead of the Spanish Grand Prix into Q3, the final stages of qualifying and the fight for pole position. Will it be Max Verstappen? Could it be one of the Mercedes drivers, or indeed the McLaren drivers or Ferrari drivers? Carlos Sainz for Ferrari, powered. Does that give you a couple of extra tenths when you're powered by your home fans? Could that see him get into the mix for pole position? It's Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, who is probably the man most under pressure out of the big teams fighting at the front of the field. Ended in the lower half of the top 10 at the end of that Q2 session. Has a 3-place grid penalty carried over from the Canadian Grand Prix in the way he retired from the race, crashing his car quite badly and continuing back to the pits with damage. The stewards deemed that unsafe and gave him a 3-place grid penalty to boot. So wherever he qualifies come the end of the next 11 minutes and 17 seconds, he will be docked 3 places for Sunday's Grand Prix, which gets going, build up 1:30 in the afternoon on BBC Radio 5 Live. Lights out from 2 o'clock as they all begin to emerge from their garages, Mark.
Yeah, Perez was a little bit like Stroll did early on in the previous session. Perez has been the early runner. He's gone out first, a long way ahead of everybody else, but it does mean, yes, he's going to get a clear track in the beginning of his run. He's got this outlap to repair his tyres with no one else there, but he is going to come across people on their outlaps now when he starts his flying lap in a moment. Of course, they're all going to get blue flags. Of course, they all, within the rules, have to get out of his way. But there are now 9 other cars emerging from the pit lane, which are going to become mobile obstacles for Sergio Perez to navigate.
Yeah, Perez is just making his way through turn 12 and 13 now, as Piastri and Gasly are emerging from the pit. So he's going to catch Oscar Piastri right coming through probably around turn 3 or 4. And then he's got Sainz, Ocon, Verstappen all in front of him as well. So Perez coming down the start-finish straight now to embark on his first flyer of Q3. Hits the brakes just after the 100-metre braking board into the right-hander that makes up turn 1. Almost a bit of a snaking S is the first sector through turns 2 and then the long right-hander of turn 3 before he hits the brakes for turn 4.
Yeah, very punishing on tyres, particularly on the left-hand side of the car. There's a lot of these long-duration corners, which are reasonably high speed, where the aerodynamics are squeezing the car down into the racetrack. Perez now finds his way nicely past the first of the McLarens without any hindrance, without any trouble. So that one's navigated successfully. On through the lap, decent first part of the lap. We've got no one to compare it to, of course, at this stage, because he's the only one on a flying lap. But it's been clean so far as he comes through the middle sector.
As his teammate Verstappen comes around the final corner, ramps up for his first fly. Indeed, Perez passes the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, who nicely gets completely off the road to get out of the way. So Sainz not wanting to risk any kind of penalty on that front. This is the sound on board with Sergio Perez round the final corner. And it will be the fastest lap time of the session so far. It's a 1:13.061, but it's the only lap time on the board so far. But Verstappen winding up, coming into the middle sector already. So too Carlos Sainz in sector 1. Sainz flying in that first sector. Verstappen having a flying start to the middle sector as well.
Yeah, it's definitely not quick enough by Perez. It's going to be at least half a second off what we'd expect Verstappen to do, and that is not going to be good enough. That should see him somewhere around the 6th, 7th mark, I'd imagine.
Used tyres for Perez on that lap, because obviously he's used up a load of his allocation already.
Yeah.
So he will be on the back foot in these early stages. Indeed, Verstappen 8/10 up on his teammate coming through the middle sector as he now makes his way through turn 12. The right-hander slightly uphill. The back end just has a little wobble for Max Verstappen, searching for the grip. He's got the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc tucked up right behind him as Leclerc embarks on his flying lap. To the line length for Max Verstappen, finds 1.3 seconds over his teammate to 1:11.6 for Max Verstappen. Provisional pole in these early stages. Carlos Sainz, though, flying in the first sector. Good lap time in the middle sector for Carlos Sainz. Let's see what he's got coming around the final corner as Ocon slots into second, immediately displaced by Carlos Sainz, who was a few tenths back, though, from Max Verstappen.
Yeah, so that was a good lap by Sainz, but it was still almost 3/10 off what Verstappen was able to do. And I just think Verstappen is, unfortunately for all of us, in a league of his own right now. He's come alive when it really matters, which is what he does very often.
So interestingly, neither Verstappen nor Sainz quite beat the time that they set in Q2. Now, I don't know whether that's because they didn't quite get their laps right or whether the track conditions have changed slightly, but might have given opportunity to someone else if they can absolutely maximise everything. And here comes Norris through the final 2 corners, Mark.
Yeah, Norris, actually flying Norris, a really strong lap. I mean, he's just coming out the final corner, turn 14, goes across the line, and he's second but by just over a tenth. So actually that's pretty impressive. We still think there potentially could be more from Verstappen, but that is an encouraging sign that Norris has managed to get so close.
Hamilton also going well out there as Leclerc slots in behind his teammate in fourth. It's Verstappen, Norris, Sainz, Leclerc, Piastri, the top five at the moment. But what do the two Mercedes have? Hamilton will come to the line first, puts his Mercedes up into third. Russell comes across the line, slots in just behind his teammate in fourth. Verstappen, Norris separated by a tenth. Then it's Hamilton a further half a tenth back ahead of Russell. Sainz is fifth, Leclerc sixth, Gasly seventh, Ocon eighth, Perez ninth, Oscar Piastri no lap time on the board. He's just coming through the final sector now, I imagine winding up for a flying lap.
Well, who would have said that we'd have two Mercedes ahead of two Ferraris just a couple of races ago? I mean, this is a real change in form and really encouraging for everybody at Mercedes. I think there's more to come from Ferrari. Sainz particularly has been looking very strong in this early part of qualifying. They'll get more runs, of course, just under 6 minutes to go on the clock. So everybody now working their way back either to the pits or out of the pits for a final run where this is going to be the last chance. If anyone's got new tyres left, this is where they go on, and this is your final opportunity to stick it on pole.
I think Piastri might have made a mistake because he's come back into the pits, no lap time set from the Australian in the McLaren, so he'll be on the back foot with only one more attempt left for him with the time left remaining.
Yeah, a little bit of pressure then for Piastri. He's seen his teammate put in a really stonking lap, just over a tenth behind the current leader, Max Verstappen. So Piastri needs to deliver something of that nature and that quality, but he does only have one opportunity to do it. It just adds a little bit of extra pressure. Of course, there's already plenty of that at this point in qualifying, but I guess he would have been hoping for a slightly smoother run into this final opportunity.
5 minutes remaining then of Q3. And in 5 minutes, we will find out who will start the Spanish Grand Prix on pole position.
Lewis doing prepping that lap.
It's fine. We'll talk about it afterwards. Head in the game.
Okay, so a bit of trouble in paradise, it seems. George Russell not happy with Lewis Hamilton in the way he was prepping for his lap.
I didn't see it, but I can only assume that he must have got in his way or somehow impeded him.
Well, they were in order, weren't they, with Hamilton ahead, so I can only assume that whatever they think is the best way to prepare the tyres on the outlap, the Mercedes drivers, Hamilton did something that stopped Russell doing what he was expecting to be able to do in his car behind.
Do you know, you sometimes I was talking to somebody the other day about Mika Häkkinen, who is the first driver I worked with in Formula One, and he always used to play games in the practice sessions, but even then into the early parts of qualifying with his teammate, who was then David Coulthard, where he'd go really quickly in 2 out of the 3 sectors, but then back off just a tiny bit in one sector to never really reveal his lap time. Then David Coulthard would have a target in mind. He'd build up to ramping up to that target, and then when it really mattered, Mika would ramp it all up in all 3 sectors and generally pop a couple of tenths on him. So drivers do play little games with their teammates. It happens all the time.
Well, all quiet out on track, but not for too much longer as they begin to emerge from the pit lane.
And in that Mercedes context, it's interesting to think about where we are this season. It's 8-1 to Russell in qualifying on the head-to-head so far, and Hamilton in the last couple of races after qualifying both times has made quite pointed remarks about various things. In Monaco he was talking about never being able to out-qualify George all year. Don't quite know what he was going on about there. In Canada he was talking about himself needing to get his head into the game. So there's actually, although it's only the qualifying for the 10th race this season, and neither of them in the World Championship fight, actually for Hamilton's pride there's a lot at stake here. He really wants to stop that rot. I'm not saying he's done anything deliberately, but it just adds to the intensity of that fight between Russell and Hamilton at Mercedes.
Certainly does, as it starts to intensify in these last couple of minutes. The clouds rolling in, grey clouds now cover the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya here in Spain. It's qualifying ahead of the Spanish Grand Prix tomorrow. You can hear that build up from 1:30 in the afternoon on BBC Radio 5 Live. Lights out from 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. Who will start on pole position? Right now, it does look like Max Verstappen and Red Bull have the advantage, but Lando Norris and the McLaren driver seems to be his closest threat at the moment, but it's 2 Mercedes ahead of 2 Ferraris. And the 2 Alpines also propping up the top 10. Perez in the Red Bull and Piastri in the McLaren, with pressure in these last couple of minutes. Piastri unable to get a quick lap earlier on in the session. Perez struggling for pace, and with a 3-place grid penalty. This is the sound of Oscar Piastri then round the final corner, gearing up for his final attempt in qualifying for the Spanish Grand Prix. His teammates up in second. Piastri will know what this car is capable of, but can he match what his teammate has done with it?
Yeah, we're about to find out. So long run down into turn 1, heavy braking zone into the right hander, then it really sweeps through. It's a very fast and flowing circuit, this track, as we've talked about, very difficult and heavy on tyres, and the drivers have to manage how much they take out of their tyres in the early part of the lap to make sure they've still got enough life and enough grip left from those tyres towards the end. So Piastri through the first sector, it's the quickest lap for him, of course, but we haven't seen anything from him so far in this particular session. I don't think it's going to be enough as the lap is unfolding so far, at least.
He's a couple of hundredths ahead of Sergio Perez in the first sector. Perez needs to find more time. He's just come through the middle sector, and Perez slower than Piastri as well, but only a couple of hundredths of a second in it. Sainz is out there a 10th up on Verstappen in the first sector. It's actually slower than his time, and Piastri throws it all away. Coming out of the right-hander of turn 12, the car gets dragged out into the gravel, and that'll be day done for Oscar Piastri. He rejoins the track, but all time lost. It will be 10th place for Oscar Piastri. The Australian will not be able to challenge for pole position or indeed a front row start, where his teammate currently sits this afternoon with just 20 seconds remaining on the clock. Fast times coming in. Sainz, Leclerc, Verstappen all out on track and challenging.
Yeah, this is going to be between Sainz and Verstappen. Verstappen already up on his own time, which is already very quick, but it's Sainz going very quickly as well. There's not very much between them.
Sainz to the line on home soil. It's second place for Sainz at the moment, a 1:11.7, less than a tenth behind Verstappen. It's closing up. Verstappen, though, is fastest of anybody in the middle sector. Charles Leclerc will out-qualify his teammate Carlos Sainz again, though, half a tenth of a second behind Max Verstappen. Nobody can match Verstappen at the moment, who is going quicker on his own lap. He's fastest of anybody in the middle sector. Round the final corner for the Dutchman. Max Verstappen, a 3-time winner here, cements pole position by over 2.5 tenths, a 1:11.4. He's got 3 tenths over Charles Leclerc, but can anybody stop him? If it's going to be anybody, it's going to be Lando Norris in the McLaren. Fastest of anybody in the middle sector. He makes his way round the last couple of corners. They removed the chicane last year, so it's now just long arcing right-handers. Norris to the line. Can he do anything? Yes, he can! Norris takes pole position for the Spanish Grand Prix by less than half a tenth of a second. Norris on pole, Verstappen second. Hamilton slots into third ahead of George Russell, who can only do fourth, and it's the 2 Ferraris who end up behind in 5th and 6th. Gasly with a fantastic 7th. Perez cements a miserable weekend so far, down in 8th, plus a 3-place grid penalty. Ocon in 9th. Oscar Piastri will not get another go after finding the gravel on his final flyer. It's McLaren who cement and sandwich the top 10. It's Lando Norris on pole, Piastri down in 10th. But what a lap from Lando Norris. Pole position for the Spanish Grand Prix.
That is unbelievable. What a lap. I mean, I looked at Verstappen's lap and thought, that is incredible. He's 3 tenths up on the guys behind him, but Norris matched it and beat it.
Pole. Go, baby. Let's go.
Amazing stuff from Lando. It's a real mixed bag from McLaren, of course. Piastri down in 10th. He'll start the race, of course, in P9 with Perez's penalty. But when a car is capable of delivering what Lando Norris has just shown it's capable of, it's even more painful for the driver that wasn't able to do it. Verstappen will be slightly disappointed because he will have left nothing out there. That was a blistering lap from both of them, but it just shows how closely matched these two drivers are, but also now these two teams.
0.02 of a second separate Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. What a lap from Lando, his second career pole position, pulls up into that P1 spot in Parc Fermé. Verstappen second. Lewis Hamilton out-qualifies his teammate George Russell for only the second time this season and will start the race from third place. His best Grand Prix starts all season long for Lewis Hamilton. Mercedes have clearly found the right direction.
Yeah, they're going to be very, very happy because they have, on genuine pace, beaten two Ferraris today who we thought might be the next contender to Max Verstappen's dominance. I looked at Carlos Sainz's early part of the lap and I thought, this is it. This is the one that could take it to Max. But it was actually, in the end, of course, Lando Norris. So Mercedes are going to be very happy to slot into third and fourth. That's a real marker of exactly how much improvement they've made. Brilliant stuff.
The fans covered in papaya orange in the grandstands, absolutely loving this. And of course, two good friends are Max Verstappen and Lando Norris, who have a smile and a chuckle to each other as they take off their helmet and balaclava and glug a bit of water. And we'll hear from our pole sitter Lando Norris, who will start the Spanish Grand Prix tomorrow afternoon on pole position and be in the fight for the win with Max Verstappen alongside him, Lewis Hamilton just behind. Oh, that's going to be box office. You've got the Ferrari starting 5th and 6th. You know they'll be hungry. I think Gasly as well will be very pleased to have out-qualified a Red Bull, who is Gasly 7th, Perez only 8th, 2 Alpines, with Luca De Meo, the chief executive of Renault, here at the track this weekend, watching on, and a lot of pressure being piled onto that Enstone team to get their first, both cars being in the top 10. They'll be very pleased with that. Oscar Piastri will be gutted though with 10th. There was more time than that, but he couldn't quite match Lando Norris all weekend, so I'm not sure he would have quite been in the battle for pole. But first, let's hear from our pole sitter who's talking to Marc Gené. It's Lando Norris. I don't think we can quite hear Marc Gené or Lando Norris there chatting. So let's see if Norris starts
that was
talking.
Enough for
there
pole.
we go.
It was pretty much a perfect lap, I think. You know when you're on a good lap, when you're getting excited, but the whole thing went perfectly in the end, so close still. But yeah, super happy. One of I'd say my best pole position. I've not had many, but out of the ones I've had, my best. And we've been close all weekend. But really this was just about a perfect lap, and that's what I did today. So it was cool. The fans and my supporters here are amazing. So a big thanks to everyone cheering me on.
As you say, this is only your second pole position, but it looked like this weekend, you know, you are really one of the favorites. I mean, what is it that you are so fast this weekend for your car and for yourself?
It's not just this weekend. You know, we've been quick the last 2 months. Since Miami, we've been very strong, and we probably missed out on a pole by just not doing a perfect lap, and today was the perfect lap. So I would say Max and Red Bull seemed a little bit stronger all weekend than what we did. But we made some changes for the final run. I had some little places to improve, and I did exactly that. So yeah, super happy to be on pole.
And final question for tomorrow: do you think you can convert that pole into a race win? Of course, I guess.
It's that's our target, but I know it's going to be tough against Max, against Lewis, and everyone behind. But we're here to win now, so that's my plan.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Enjoy.
Lando Norris, pole sitter
Max,
for the Spanish Grand Prix.
It was a very close battle. You've been on pole position more than anyone. You are having some difficulties this weekend, but again on pole today you were very fast. Did you think you had a chance today to be on pole after Q1 and Q2?
Yeah, I think in qualifying it was all coming together a bit nicer. The whole weekend, we've been trying to find a bit of a connected balance, because in all the practice session it was very difficult. So I was quite happy in qualifying. I mean, even in Q3 I got a nice little toe from Checo to turn 1 to really extract everything we could, and unfortunately it was just not enough. But that is how it goes sometimes. I think overall we can still be very happy with this performance in qualifying, and it's definitely all to play for tomorrow.
The slipstream was just chance, or did you work for it? And then how much did the temperature affect? Because it was much cooler today than this morning.
Yeah, I just by chance. I didn't even know initially where Checo was on the lap, and then they told me where he was. So I was like, I'll try to hang on to him. Besides that, with the temperature, I do think it was a bit more fun in qualifying. But even I think throughout qualifying, the wind started to pick up a little bit. Maybe that made it a bit more difficult for us in Q3, but overall, good performance again in qualifying.
You've been having an easy time in the past. Now it's a bit more challenging. What do you prefer? The challenge that you have from your competitors, or to have easy poles like in the past?
At the end of the day, they're never really easy poles, because you're always in a battle with yourself. But of course now it's with more teams, and I think that is good for Formula One in general. And of course, when it's always that close, for a pole position, I think that's always great.
Anyway, well done for today.
Thank you.
Lewis Hamilton, you have a lot of supporters everywhere you go. Big crowd. Today, I guess you are happy P3. Were you expecting more? How happy are you with your lap and with your position for qualifying?
Yeah, I'm really happy. Firstly, thank you everyone. So happy to be here, and super grateful to be up on in the top 3. It's been quite a difficult year, so huge amount of work from everyone back at the factory, and finally we're starting to see those incremental steps moving closer to the guys ahead. I didn't expect us to be fighting for pole necessarily, but every now and then there look like there were bits there, and maybe we'll be close, and so to be there I'm just grateful.
So can we say really that you've made, as a team, big step in the last few Grand Prix? It looked like in Canada, that is a confirmation, I guess. That's a very demanding track.
Yeah, we've made huge steps forwards, and it's really just down to every single individual back at the factory who's pushing in design, pushing in making the new parts that we get to bring as early as possible to these races, and slowly the car is crafting into a racing machine that we can hopefully fight the guys at the front. So George did a great job as well today, so hopefully tomorrow we can apply pressure on the 2 cars ahead.
Thank you, and well done for this P3.
Yes.
Thanks.
Well, there we are, 1, 2, 3 for the Spanish Grand Prix. Lando Norris starts on pole position for McLaren. Alongside him will be Max Verstappen. Lewis Hamilton just behind, and what an end to a qualifying that was. Russell 4th, ahead of the 2 Ferraris, Leclerc and Sainz. Then it's the Alpine of Pierre Gasly. Sergio Perez 8th in qualifying. Bear in mind, he'll have a 3-place grid penalty applied for the race. He'll end that qualifying session in 8th, ahead of Ocon in 9th. Piastri, who had his first lap time deleted and then made a mistake going off into the gravel, couldn't get another one in, ended up 10th. Alonso in 11th, Bottas, then Hulkenberg, Stroll, Joe in 15th, ahead of Magnussen, Tsunoda, Ricciardo, and it'll be the 2 Williams drivers of Alex Albon and Logan Sargent who will start 19th and 20th and line up on the back row ahead of the Spanish Grand Prix. My thanks to Mark Priestley and Andrew Benson. We're going to be digesting all of that in the Checkered Flag podcast, which you can listen to a little later on today in the BBC Sounds app. The race will be on 5 Live tomorrow. We'll be on air for build-up from 1:30 in the afternoon, ahead of Lights Out from 2 o'clock. Lando Norris starts on pole position for the Spanish Grand Prix. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.